No no pu ki uki ka maka o ke ko ola. Tu uva hine pua kaya ulu o lalo ho ki vai akana ulu. I ka hime ai ka huna, e maka huna, me he haila ai ka pili o hue. E mai.
Aloha mai kākou.
Aloha.
Aloha. Ova o Kau'i Burgess. I am Kau'i Burgess. I'm the Director of Community and Government Relations at Kamehameha Schools, which is a private, educational, charitable trust in Hawaii that was founded and endowed by the Princess Bernice Pauahi Bishop. And I will serve as the MC today. Aloha kākou.
Aloha.
Aloha to the kupuna and the ohana o keia aina nei o Wakine Kona. They say, a me ka aina o Hawaii, I greet the elders and the families of this land, this aina of Washington, D.C., and those of Hawaii, those who are here today, seen and unseen. Aloha. We'd like to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you to the members of the community who are here, members of the offices of the Capitol, the staffers of the Capitol, and also mahalo nui to the media who are here today to cover this important event in commemorating the 100th anniversary of the enactment of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. We want to welcome everyone here today and just say thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your days, your schedules to be with us. And today at the East Plaza of the United States House of Representatives, we will hear from a number of special guests who have traveled here to Washington, D.C. from Hawaii. And at this time, to kick off our time together, I'd like to introduce Hawaii's newest member of Congress, representing Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District, United States Representative Kahele. Congressman.
Mahalo. Aloha mai kākou. Mahalo, Kau'i, for your introduction. Today, July 9th, 2021, marks the 100th anniversary of the enactment and the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. It is a significant day in the hearts and minds of Kanaka Oiwi, of Native Hawaiians, here in D.C., at home in Hawaii, and around the world. We would not be here without the intentional foresight of one man. With us are representatives from the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Kamehameha Schools, Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, Lunalino Trust, and the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs. Thank you all for being here today. Your presence elevates the significance of this day. 100 years ago, generations before our time, this man would leave his homeland of Hawaii to selflessly advocate for his people in Congress. And in the process, he would accomplish the seemingly impossible, to effect change that would empower the posterity of an entire indigenous population. Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalani Anaole, a son, husband, prince, and revolutionary statesman, accomplished this as the champion of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. As a non-voting delegate to the then territory of Hawaii, his ability to pass this landmark legislation proved his talent as a skilled diplomat and a remarkable leader. President Warren G. Harding signed the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act on July 9th, 1921, which initiated the United States Trust responsibility to the Native Hawaiian community, with the establishment of a federal land trust of over 200,000 acres. The intent of the act would create a permanent homeland for Native Hawaiians and return the people aina ho'opulapula to their lands in order to support self-sufficiency and self-determination. Today, the act supplies nearly 10,000 homestead lessees, providing housing to countless families across the state of Hawaii, and to this day remains the most significant piece of legislation for the advancement of Native Hawaiians. Yet, we need to do more. We must do more. Thousands of Native Hawaiians have died while on the wait list, and 28,000, remain waiting in hopes to receive a homestead lease. Native Hawaiians are overrepresented among the houseless population in Hawaii, and the high cost of living further threatens to increase this sad statistic. Within the next year, for the first time in history, it is estimated that the number of Native Hawaiians living in Hawaii will fall below the number of Native Hawaiians living elsewhere. This is unacceptable. The Hawaiian Homes Commission Act can help narrow the divide toward home ownership for Native Hawaiians. The Hawaiian Homes Commission Act has faced many challenges in its administration, its implementation, its lack of sufficient funding. But because of the support and the dedication of the groups present today, as well as Hawaii's former senators and representatives, Congress maintains the act and ensures its continuity to serve its beneficiaries. I'm honored to continue the work of Prince Kuhio, who fought tirelessly to strengthen his beloved people and perpetuate the Hawaiian culture. Today in Washington, 100 years later, we celebrate the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act with reverence and deep appreciation for Keali'i Maka'ainana, Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalani Anaole. Let us honor his legacy by continuing to remember and empower all Native Hawaiians everywhere. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui, Congressman Kahele. Mahalo for that call to action. Okay, at this time, I'd like to call up United States Representative for Hawaii's 1st Congressional District, Congressman Ed Case.
To my colleague and friend, Congressman Kahele, our incredible guests that are here today, and to our friends in Ohana that are watching, aloha. You know, as I stand with you here today, and as I am with you today, I have so many conflicting thoughts and emotions. We, of course, here are on hallowed ground. We are on ground that for centuries now has stood for the very best of humanity, and yet we are on ground that would at a bare minimum tolerate the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom. We are on ground that has advocated and advanced equality, opportunity, compassion, and justice, and yet has seen so much toleration and tragedy towards our country's indigenous peoples. We're on ground, but just 6 or 8 months ago, we celebrated the passing of one of the great icons of the civil rights movement, John Lewis. And yet, it is this very ground that saw an attack on our capital by our own fellow citizens. A lot of contradictions. And yet this was also the ground that Kuhio came to 120 years ago. He spoke then of the urgency and despair of a people facing extinction in their own land, and that was no idle concern. It had happened to other indigenous peoples throughout our country and throughout the world. There were just perhaps 40,000 Native Hawaiians left in the world. The life expectancy of Native Hawaiians in 1910 was 30 years. They were increasingly living not on the land, but in the tenements of Honolulu in dire circumstances. And yet, Kuhio entrusted his people to this still new country, a country that frankly had not shown that it was deserving of that trust. The Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, as Congressman Kahele has said, was his singular accomplishment. But what was Kuhio's legacy? What did it all add up to? You know, history is fickle. We're all judged by our successes and failures, our achievements and our shortcomings, always in hindsight, of course. But I would say this about Kuhio. looking from the distance of history and as someone who is not myself Native Hawaiian. First of all, he was the right person at the time, not just for Native Hawaiians, but for all of us whose ancestry and blood lies in Hawaii. The Kanaka Maoli did not, unlike many of their brothers and sisters, fade from this earth. In fact, you now number hundreds of thousands throughout our country, fulfilling responsibilities at every level of government and society. And finally, I would say that Kuhio, as the first Native Hawaiian leader to step forward on the national stage, showed what proud and principled and capable Hawaiian leadership is and set the example for so many of us going down the road. But history is never complete, and today we are just at one moment in history, and the Hawaiian Homes Commission is a perfect example. As one Kanaka Maoli leader said recently, she said it was beautifully conceived and yet imperfectly administered and implemented. And it is its own story, and now we have to turn that page, and today I follow and support Congressman Kahele in finding the next chapter. For yesterday's achievements are just tomorrow's foundations, and yesterday's failures are just tomorrow's opportunities. And so I am sit here with you all, just so deeply humbled with the responsibility for all of us, for whom Hawaii is our home, to partner with you in these next chapters of renewed opportunity and hope. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Congressman Case. The Department of Hawaiian Homelands works to improve the lives of Native Hawaiians through the administration of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. At this time, I'd like to welcome the Deputy to the Chairman of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, Deputy Tyler Iokepa Gomes.
Ano ai kākou, aloha. O wau o Tyler Iokepa Gomes, ka hope luna ho'okele no ke ana o ka aina ho'opulupulu o iwi. My name is Tyler Iokepa Gomes. I'm the Deputy to the Chairman for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. I am so incredibly proud and honored to be here on behalf of our Commission, as well as the Department, for the centennial celebration of the passing of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. I want to begin by extending a mahalo to our Congressman Case and Congressman Kahele, as well as our Senators Schatz and Hirono for their continued support on behalf of the Lahui and the Native Hawaiian community here in DC. I also want to send our aloha back home to our Aina Oiwi, to our Chairman William J. Aila Jr., as well as our commissioners who are at this very moment kicking off a celebration with our homesteaders and beneficiaries and leaders back home. Lastly, I want to honor those beneficiaries, not only here who joined us in DC, but across the globe. As the true recipients of Kuhio's vision, it's important that we keep them at the forefront of our mind. Our prior speakers have talked to the history of the Act as well as its importance. So I want to use this time to speak to kuleana, or responsibility, and that is the kuleana of fulfilling the 100-year promise of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. That promise and that kuleana is something that unites not only our 9 commissioners, but also the 150 staff across the entire state who work tirelessly to fulfill that vision each and every day. As we collectively look back on the last 100 years, I like to look forward to what is the legacy we leave for the next 100. And I think the call to action to fulfill that kuleana is to be an advocate. It's for all of us to be advocates. We must continue to advocate here at the federal level to ensure that we have the proper resources to develop new infrastructure and homesteads, but we also have to be mindful of the fact that we have 100-year-old aging homesteads who need support. We need to continue to advocate back at home to ensure that the state fulfills its constitutional mandate to sufficiently fund the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and we also need to explore new partnerships to ensure that we address the Native Hawaiian housing crisis creatively. Lastly, we need to advocate in our own communities so that we can unite in one leo, or voice, and speak in a resounding tone to the fact that justice delayed for the beneficiaries of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act is justice denied. So when I speak to kuleana and I say our kuleana, I'm not just speaking about the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, I'm speaking about the entire Lahui, all of us. And as I look around at all of the organizations and supporters who have joined us not just here in DC, but also at home, I'm so encouraged about the potential and the possibility for all of us to holomua and work together to put forward progress for the next 100 years in fulfillment of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. We've got a little bit of rain in our culture. That's a blessing, and I'm going to choose to believe that this is Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalaniana Ole acknowledging all of us being here in support. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Deputy Gomes. Carmen Hulu Lindsay has represented the island of Maui as a trustee for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs since January 2012. She's the current chair of the Board of Trustees, and it is my pleasure to introduce her to you today. Trustee Lindsay.
Aloha mai kākou, and mahalo Congressman Kahele and Case for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, whose mission is to better the conditions of Native Hawaiians. We are here today to recall, to remember, and to be inspired by the life and accomplishments of Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalaniana Ole, whose advocacy on behalf of Native Hawaiians led to the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act 100 years ago. When the Kingdom of Hawaii was legally overthrown by American businessmen supported by the United States, Prince Kuhio rallied to support the kingdom. Later, when Hawaiians sought an increasing role in the non-Hawaiian government following the overthrow, Prince Kuhio helped organize an opposition to support Hawaiian interests. Finally, when Hawaiians needed a strong voice in the halls of Congress, where decisions affecting Hawaiians were being made, Prince Kuhio became Hawaii's second delegate to the United States Congress and was successfully elected 10 years. Prince Kuhio witnessed firsthand the separation of Hawaiians from their lands and from self-determination. Despite not having a vote, he pushed Congress to create a program to empower Hawaiians to survive and flourish in a Hawaii that was increasingly controlled by powerful non-Hawaiian interests. Today we celebrate his success in that push, which became law exactly 100 years ago. While Prince Kuhio displayed his expert statesmanship in advocating for and passing this act, we must also acknowledge the strong civic engagement of Hawaiians at the turn of the 20th century. Indeed, Hawaiians were actively involved in debating issues and electing officials who supported Hawaiians at every level of government. Hawaiian political engagement is as important today as it was to Kuhio and the Hawaiians of his generation. Throughout our history, the periods of strongest political engagement have nurtured the greatest self-determination for Hawaiians. As Hawaiian leaders today, we must carry on Prince Kuhio's legacy and advance federal, state, and local policies that serve the Native Hawaiian community. Hawaiian leaders must also call on the United States to fulfill its trust responsibilities to Native Hawaiians. Imahalo, Congressman Kahele, Congressman Case, Senator Schatz, Senator Hirono, for your partnership with OHA and our beneficiaries to that end. In Prince Kuhio's honor, let us commit to being more actively involved in our governance as leaders, as community members, and as voters. Eia no mako na pula-pula o Hawaii, me ka ha'a-ha'a, a me ka oia'io, a me ke aloha pau ole. Mahalo.